Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to this very special Wanderlust event. And this evening, we're taking you to British Columbia in Canada. Absolutely fantastic part of the world. And I'm sure some of you have been there before. And so hello to everybody. Saying hello in the chat box. Julia Jenkins was first in from Southend-on-Sea. I see we've got Cara from Ontario. So welcome from Canada. And Jackie in Spain, Julie in Lancashire, Rebecca in Manchester, Linda in Chippenham, who I know is a regular on here, Sheila in Teddington, Deborah in Minneapolis. So greetings. And hello to Maureen in Cheltenham, Mary, it's BB from Dublin, welcome. Jackie in Ashstead, Douglas in sunny Edinburgh. Yes, we've got a sunny evening here as well after a day of rain, which is great to know. Hello to Suzanne in Southampton. Gordon says hello to everybody from Chorley in Lancashire. And Steve from Maidstone says he won a Wanderlust trip to British Columbia in 2003. And it was an awesome time. I'm sure it was, Steve. Hello to Vicky in West Wales. Christian in Denmark, good evening. And, Christian, I'm very jealous. You saw a Komodo bear on the inland passage. Yes, fantastic. And hello to Carla all the way from Arizona. You were in Arizona. And Glenn and Barry in Guildford, good evening. Stephen in Birmingham. Pamela says hello from damp and gloomy Kent, but she's got 4 fox cubs in her garden this year. I'm looking forward to hearing about British Columbia foxes. I know we're going to touch on wolves tonight, but I don't know if we'll be doing foxes as well. And yes, I have a fox coming to my garden. Tina says it's raining in Thanet in Kent. Welcome. And Frankie in Brighton, Nick in London, who's near the Bonds wetlands. Oh, wonderful. That's a wonderful place, isn't it? Fantastic birding there. Anita in Norwich. And Cindy all the way from Johannesburg in South Africa. So we always cover the world. Gordon says he's going to British Columbia next month and really looking forward to it. So I'm sure we're going to give you even more ideas this evening, Gordon. Hello to Mandy in Hitchin and Hazel in Lincoln. Aloysius, how do you pronounce that, in Surrey-Hill? So welcome. Edu says hello from the Basque Country. Yeah, Vicky, glad to hear the sun's just come out. So that's great. And so we will be kicking off in a moment. We're just waiting for a few more people to join us. And then we're in for a real treat talking about British Columbia. And we've got a couple of great speakers this evening. So really looking forward to this. And hello to Anna Wiltshire, David in Gloucestershire, Mary in Dartmouth. Oh, lovely Dartmouth. So, we are covering the country tonight. And I know that obviously this time of year, people do sometimes want to get outside or whatever. So we will, as ever, be recording this evening's event. And we will be then sending out a link to it in the follow-up email. So if for any reason, I know you're going to want to stay to the very, very end, but if for any reason you do have to leave before the end, we will be sending out the link. And Justin says one of his favourite BC memories was helping a National Geographic photographer photograph bears from a boat in the rain. Yes, I'm sure that was so exciting, and despite the rain. And there's something very special about bears, isn't it? Trevor says he's off to BC with Audley in August, a 7-week trip. Can't wait. Brilliant. And hello to Elaine from Yorkshire. And brilliant. Okay, so what are we going to be doing this evening? Well, like I say, we're going to be talking about British Columbia. Such a fantastic part of Canada. Obviously, it seems to have it all, doesn't it? It's got the coastline, the mountains, the rainforest, and the wildlife. You've got bears, it's got whales, it's got wolves. And so British Columbia is a fantastic place to really get back to nature, but also connect with the local culture, which I know is part of what we'll be hearing about tonight. And so that is why this evening, though, has been called the British Columbia effect, because of the effect it has on us when we do go. And of course, the fact that we want to go again and again. Yeah, I've been fortunate to be several times over the last 30 or so years. And the last time I went was to the Great Bear Rainforest. So I'm particularly looking forward as well to this evening, because I know we are going to be talking about that. So if I just introduce our speakers, our main speaker for this evening is Mike Willey. And Mike's owner of Seawolf Adventures. And his team of Indigenous expert guides help people to discover British Columbia's culture and nature, and doing activities such as bear watching and whale watching. Mike was brought up by his mother in Kingcom Inlet in the Great Bear Rainforest, and in a remote place with a population of just around 80 people. Mike's tours are inspired by the territory of the land that the First Nations people come from, and he loves getting out into natural surroundings and, of course, sharing that passion. Mike will be this evening filling us in on his personal highlights and his stories of British Columbia, and the effect it has on him growing up in it, and why it's such a special place to visit. So welcome, Mike. And very quickly, Mike, because I'm calling you Mike, but what's your Indigenous name?
I have a few. So Tlalis is my everyday name, and Old Seaweed is my chieftain name.
Oh, okay. Are we going to be hearing more about the meanings of the names in your talk?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, brilliant. Look forward to that. Okay, thank you. And then also joining us for this event this evening is Rosalind Wilkes from Audley. And thank you to Audley as ever for supporting this event. And Ros first visited Canada. Can't get my words out tonight. Ros first visited Canada at age 2. And it must have made a huge impression on her even then, because she's been back many times since. She has spent years living and traveling in Canada. And so this evening, she's going to be sharing her advice and recommendations for traveling in British Columbia. So that is brilliant. So what we'll be doing this evening is we'll be hearing, first of all, from Mike, as I say, then we'll be followed up by Ros, and then there'll be time for your questions at the end. And so do post your questions in the chat box as we go along. And there will be a couple of the Audley team as well interacting in the chat box, so they might be able to answer your questions straight away. I'll certainly try and go through as many questions as possible at the end. And as I say, we will, as ever, be doing the follow-up email too. So if you don't catch the name of somewhere or something, we will make sure as well that that's either in the email, and of course, there'll be that link to the follow-up video. So why don't we get on with it? Because I know our speakers are going to have masses to say. So let's have a short video to get us in the mood.
Find yourself here, in a performance of human and nature, spirits embracing, catching what we were chasing, and the silence is our thunderous applause. For we are connecting. In these moments we will find ourselves again, through these places that we have been. We will be in awe, not of their beauty, but of ourselves, that we can feel so deeply, and be filled so completely.
Well, that really was short and sweet, wasn't it? But it gave us a great kind of start to this event. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Mike. Welcome, Mike. Welcome back. And yes, really looking forward to this. Leave you to it.
Yeah, thanks for this opportunity. Bela Kesla Gecha Kusnit Namuk, Nuam Alis, Gayu Kenlacha Muskamag Zawadeno. I just wanted to thank everyone for joining, and for Audley and Wanderlust giving me the opportunity to collaborate. And I guess the best way I could share my part of the world is to share with you who I am and where I grew up, and what the culture and the surroundings meant to me. And so I'll start off with this slide. This slide represents, actually it's a language map. So in British Columbia, there's 34 different distinct languages. We hold 2/3 of Canada's First Nations languages just here on the coast. And on Vancouver Island, there's 3 separate languages. And so what you see, the color here represents our dialects. It's Kwakwala is the language. And within that language, there's 5 different dialects. And so we're very diverse here on the coast. Many different nations here. And let's see here. Where I grew up within the territory is a place called Kingcom Inlet, or Guai, the traditional name. And this is the community that Lynn talked about, a community of 80 people, surrounded by mountains, surrounded by the forest. There's actually no roads to this community. You have to come up the river that you see in the picture. And it's still like that today. But growing up there, I grew up with my great grandma. I just missed I remember when my great grandfather left the community in the helicopter being medevaced out, and he never came back. I must have been 3. So he passed away, but he was our historian, songkeeper. Like, a lot of our history is recorded through song. And so I think they got like 700 songs out of the old man and put it on tape. And the reel-to-reels would play every single day. So I get to hear them every day. And I really believe that shaped who I am. I could speak the language, and I'm also a songkeeper. And I think you talk about imprinting. Well, that was my imprinting. Kingcom was also, if I would say, blessed by its geography because it's so remote. At one time, the Canadian government were trying to assimilate us into, Canadians' history. So a lot of our ceremonies, we couldn't gather. The potlatch was banned, and our people went to jail. And so this pole represents the resurgence of our people through those dark times. Actually, you could see the British flag there. This was carved during those times where it was against the law to practice our culture. And the only way to get this pole up was to say that it was in memory of King George V when he passed away, and we had this whole ceremony. But the chiefs, the ultimate goal was to erect it to represent our tribes and to let everybody know that we're still here. You can still have the principles and the values of our people. The honor, the charity, the respect, and the unity. This was in 1938 when this was put up, and it's still up today. And it represents 4 tribes, and we were a confederacy from the beginning of time. This is what, the dwellings that, the traditional style dwellings made out of cedar. Everything was made out of cedar. Cedar is what we call in English the tree of life. And, you look at our transportation, dugout canoes. You look at the siding, you look at the roofing, you look at the totem poles, the carvings. The clothing was made out of the cedar bark. And so this is where we were. And this is, some harmonious times back in the day. There is one big house that still stands today, and this is it here. The outside has been, newly renovated, but the inside poles were put up in 1887, which makes it the oldest standing traditional bakehouse on the coast. Still standing. We still use this. We still practice our ceremonies and our culture. And this is in my home community in Guayastums, and also where my chieftainship comes from. So growing up in Kingcom, talking about being imprinted with the language and culture and values, naturally I gravitated to a more of a leading role within our peoples. And this particular picture, I'm gathering coal so that we could use it and put the baby's hair on it, so the smoke of the baby's hair actually starts to purify the baby. So this is a baby naming ceremony. And this role was, I've been in this role for quite a while. And so it was, between, when baby's born till they're 10 moons, we count the months and moons and back home, that they were balancing between life on earth and the spirit world. So once 10 moons reaches, then it's like a graduation. It's like they're here to stay. They get a name and they get protection. And so the protection is the singeing of the hair. We put red ochre all over the face to protect the baby. Also represents that this baby comes from a long line of nobility. And so talk about recognizing our children, so important. Because this is what it's all about. And our way of life is always thinking ahead for the future generations. And hence, like you think about our language, it's so verb-based that everything is action. And so that's how we're so connected to the environment. Indigenous peoples from around the world that's all they want to do is protect the environment. If you protect the environment will protect you. And so there's a reciprocating thing that this knowledge has been passed down for centuries. And there came a time where my role was even upped further to become a chief of our family and one of the chiefs of our tribe. So that's where old seaweed came in, was put on to me. There were thousands and thousands of old seaweeds before me, but now I'm old seaweed of today. And the standing is old. It's like the House of Parliament. You have your different groups, and there's pecking orders in there too. So I'm ranked number 3 within our clan, our family group. We call it Namima. But this was at our potlatch. And this photo actually is taken by John Lamont. He was an amazing photographer, and he captured this image. This is the Umista Cultural Center, which actually the residential school was just beside this Umista Cultural Center. So I'll talk about the residential school, because I'm wearing this orange shirt and to honor my mother, who's a residential school survivor. And lately they've been finding unmarked graves around all of the residential schools of children. And you talk about that ceremony, the honoring of the babies. Well, those children never had a chance, and it was very emotional. I had to go and pick my mom up because it just re-traumatized her and brought her home to live with me for a while. And it's important to know this history because we want to move forward from that, right? We want to create a better story, and we want the future of our history to be a good one. And I think that over here in Canada, there's something called the Truth and Reconciliation. And I believe in that. And that's our nations coming together, working together, charting a path forward together. And so getting back to this facility, what you see here, it's one of a kind. It's you see that not all the masks and the artifacts, they're not behind glass like you see in the middle. And that was a decision made by our elders at the time, back in the early 80s. These masks were actually confiscated by the RCMP from a local place called Village Island, and a lot of the chiefs went to jail because, like I said, it was against the law. And so from 1921 till 1981, they stayed in Ottawa, and the only way to get them back was to erect this facility, and it's, a museum, like, the humidity needs to be right. So when they came back, a lot of the elders were kids there in the 1920s, and they remembered a lot of these pieces, so they were able to start identify these pieces belong, who these, this belongs to Harry Mountain, this belongs to Billy Sunday. So it was emotional for them, and they said these masks have been boxed up and behind vaults for so long that they didn't want to just put them behind another, container. So that's why it's an open concept, and the setting itself, like you see the big posts, that's a typical size big house back in the day. It's like 40 by 60. 40 feet wide, 60 feet long. And the timber is the live, real size timber. And so they used the fulcrum point to get the big timbers up. And it was permanent. It lasts a long time. Cedar lasts a long time because of the resin inside the fiber. So that leads, when I started Seawolf, it was all about reconnecting to the homelands, the motherlands. Vancouver Island, I had accepted a language and culture teaching position in Port Hardy, but I really missed Kingcom, where that slide I showed you. My mom was still living there, so I need a boat, I need a service, and our business turned from a water taxi into actually an Indigenous tourism company, and that offers grizzly bear viewing, whale watching, blended in with all of our culture. And this is the mornings. It's nice to be able to depart into the territory, just vast with islands and islets. And, there's so many archaeological sites in and out of these islands that you get the picture that there were thousands more of our people prior to the smallpox pandemic as well, right? And so much history. And the resilience of our people is there because we're still alive. We still, there's something to be said about oral tradition. Oral tradition requires people, and people record the history in their minds. And so that's how it was. We didn't have a written language, or we didn't document in the early days because that just wasn't a part of our paradigm. And so when you come into the territory, this is what you see. Really good opportunities for photography. I love photography myself, just because I love capturing all of the Nat Geo moments that we're in pretty much every day. And as First Nations people, we always pay tribute to our surroundings and the wildlife within our surroundings. And if you were to come here and look at the totem poles, well, what are on those totem poles? Well, it's all wildlife on these totem poles. Our masks, we pay tribute to them, we respect them. I guess you could say we're like a pod of orcas. They're so tight, like the family, and connecting with one another is very, very important for our way of life. Hence, like the potlatching, so the showing of your history, calling people, like some of our potlatches, there'll be about 1,000 people that show up now. Our big houses went from 40 by 60 to just these ginormous big houses now where we fit, 1,000 to 1,200 people. And that's just to, re-establish your history with the people's, in their minds. So that's part of the whole, our method and our way of recording history. You see the sea line, but the mountains even in the background, that's a significance, right? That's Kwe, and there's 4 peaks on there, which represents the 4 tribes that I talked to you about. Like the totem pole in Kingcom, the 4 different figures on there. Well, there's 4 peaks in here, and for thousands of years, that's what it represented, is the connection between the 4 tribes. So there's Jawadeno, Quiksutino, Guaweno, and Haquatmis. The bear viewing, So this is Emily, and Emily's Caroline's not there anymore, so she's the only breeding female that's left in the area. But so we get so like closely attached to the grizzlies that we work with, because we've watched them from when they're cubs, and then they're growing, they're sub-adults, and then they're adults, and every bear has their own characteristics. They fish differently, and so along the river, when the salmon are running, these bears, they congregate into a spot where we go, and we sit along the riverbank and we watch them feed on salmon. And salmon lately has been, the decline of the population, but that's what myself and my nation are working very, very hard at, bringing back the wild salmon for the bears, for the orcas, but also for our own people. Like, it's about food security now for us, and salmon was very much at the top of our diet prior to colonization. You get to see dolphins in our territory. That's where they have their babies, is in our territory. So in May, it's quite cute when they hold them up on top of the water. And these dolphins are, they're in our history too. And our history is quite old. I know the archaeological record says it's around 15,000, but archaeology is so new here in BC that our elders and our chiefs, that number is a lot older. This guy is Roy, and so Roy was our boy. He, such a great bear, and I got a little story to tell you about him. He had a hard time fishing, and he was actually getting kind of skinny because he just couldn't catch the salmon. And his brother is the same age. His name's Andy. He was a great fisherman. And so I'm looking down the river, and I was wondering, Andy's got he's cornered something. He's not moving. But Roy he was about maybe 75 meters away. And all of a sudden he turns back and he starts just doing a full-on sprint towards his brother. And I thought, okay, they're going to fight. So I grabbed my camera. And no, he came in, grabbed the salmon, and walked up into the forest. So I learned two things there. Obviously, he was called back by his brother, but his brother also knew that he was struggling, and he cornered a salmon for him. So that was like a really good thing to witness, and that these animals they're just like us, right? As First Nations people, we do care for each other. We're very, very emotional people. This old fella, his name's Numas, which means the old wise one. He's getting so old now that he likes to sleep a lot. And sometimes we bump into him in the bear trails when we're walking with our guests, and he's just there sleeping away. He's got this tooth that sticks out, and he still fishes though. So what we find is the older the bears, the smarter they are, right? Like they don't pounce around on the salmon like the young bears do. They're very precise, and it's so awesome to watch them fish and show off their what they've learned throughout their lifetime. Cute little cubs inside the inlet. So this is in Night Inlet, which is one of the places where we go. You get to watch bears learn how to eat in their environment. So in this environment, they eat the barnacles and the mussels, and they turn over the rocks and eat whatever's underneath the rocks. On another excursion we do, so I own Sea Wolf Adventures, but I'm also a partner in Coastal Rainforest Safaris, which we do sea otters, and it's in a different environment. It's on the northern tip of Vancouver Island, whereas the bears, we go over to the fjords and to the mainland. Different environment, lots of kelp forests out there. You're in the swell, but lots of sea otters, and you get to see the mums and the pups, and it's a good trip. So back to Sea Wolf. This is how we, we go to with us, we have access to a lot of our rivers because it's our territory. And we jump into small little tender boats like this and putt up the river and get off and walk the bear trails. Sometimes if we have enough time, we'll stop off for lunch at one of our old ancient village sites. My community, my band, First Nations, they bought this floating facility. So we're very happy to be able to partner with our First Nation, and bring some photography tours here. And we stay in the cabins, the floating cabins there. And that puts us right into the heart of the Great Bear Rainforest. So we can go get the whales one day, get the bears the next day, go for hikes on the next day, go to the community if we want to. So there's lots of diversity there. This is the Coastal Rainforest Safari's vessel up in the northern tip of Vancouver Island, a place called Hope Island. Yeah, I think that's about it. My timer went off. I don't know if you heard that, but I'm going to pass it back to whomever.
Oh, thanks, Mike. I mean, I think everybody like me would have been enthralled by that. There was so much there, just so absorbed. Have you got a favourite animal? I mean, you're talking in particular about the bears. Do you have a special affinity with bears, or is there another species that you feel a special affinity for?
Humpback whales is another one, because Alice actually is a humpback whale name that throughout the history, my great-grandfather listened to him on tape. He said this happened when the mouth of the river was up the river at a place called Haiduguai. And so what I did with an archaeologist was, okay, that's about 20 feet, where were the sea levels then? So we figured about 5,000 years ago when this whale got beached down the river. And so my ancestor went and helped it off. And from that time, these whale names came into our family.
Oh, and when do you regularly see fox? Sorry, just fox gone past the window. It knows we're talking wildlife, obviously. So is there a particular time of year that's good to see the humpbacks, or what are the chances of seeing a humpback?
There's some that stay here now because most of them, they migrate over to Hawaii and then they come back. But June's fine. June right till October, late October is a good time to see humpback whales and wildlife.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. Well, I'm sure we're going to have lots more wildlife questions at the Q&A. So thank you again so much for that, and we'll see you back for the Q&A.
Sounds good.
Thanks. Cheers, Mike. And we're going to hand over now to Roz to give some of her insights into British Columbia. So thanks, Roz.
Thank you very much, Lynn. Thank you, Mike. That was an absolutely fantastic talk about the sort of history here of Vancouver Island. What I'm going to be chatting about really is some of the things that you can do if you kind of take a little bit of a trip over to British Columbia. Obviously, there is a lot of area to cover. This map kind of shows you the area of British Columbia, and I'm afraid we don't quite have enough time to go into detail of every single town that is here. But what I hope I can do is just give you a bit of an insight and give you some real suggestions on where you could visit. Now, I suppose we really have to start in the heart of British Columbia, obviously the city of Vancouver. You may be looking at this image now thinking, doesn't look very city-like. And I suppose that's one of the fantastic things about Vancouver as a city. You've got the beautiful metropolis, beautiful restaurants, culture, history, but you also are surrounded by stunning mountains, beautiful harbourfront, and some beautiful options of getting into nature for those who aren't necessarily the biggest city buffs in the world. It's a great starting point for trips. There are direct flights in from London and from other parts of the sort of Canada if you're kind of going cross country as well. So it's a really nice place to kind of base yourself at the start of your trip, and possibly at the end as well, do a kind of nice loop around British Columbia. In terms of Vancouver, one thing I've got actually on this next slide that I think is fantastic to be able to do is the kind of seaplanes, which along the harbour front just tend to kind of glide in over the city. You can spend quite a bit of time just watching them land. It's quite hypnotic, but it is fantastic if you can get to go onto a seaplane. There are kind of options that will take you across to Vancouver Island. There are ones that will just do a panoramic view across the city. So it's a lovely way to be able to just get a slightly different viewpoint of the city. The other thing that I often recommend doing is getting on a bike, and Vancouver has some of the most beautiful parks, and Stanley Park is well renowned for its kind of seawall, which you can venture out to via bike, and use Vancouver's many bike lanes to kind of traverse the city quite safely, and get everywhere very quickly. So lovely kind of way to spend your days there. We've just thrown in a little bit of a suggestion here for accommodation. Of course, Vancouver being quite a big city, there's lots of different options, but one of our particular favourites is the Listall Hotel. It's kind of got quite a nice boutique feel to it, not kind of big and sprawling like some of the others along the harbour front. And also has sort of First Nations artwork in the rooms. Often will do a sort of nice wine tasting evenings, and has a beautiful brunch spot in the restaurant downstairs as well. So a nice place to base yourself whilst you're there. From here, this is where you will, I guess, venture out to explore British Columbia. And I will kind of mention at this point that really self-driving is the best way to be able to get out and explore. For British sensibilities, sometimes I know I can get clients who are a little bit nervous about driving, but the roads are absolutely fantastic. And I think particularly to be able to kind of see the scenery, have the kind of flexibility to explore at your own pace, and to be able to just get around with ease. Driving is really one of the best ways to go. There are a few transport links, as I was mentioning before, seaplanes and things like that, but to really get the best, particularly of places like Vancouver Island and the remote places that Mike was mentioning, for example, getting up there, a car will serve you very well. As some of you may recognise, this image here is Victoria, and a fantastic place to be able to kind of start off your trip. A little bit more of a built-up area in Vancouver Island, but for those kind of wildlife lovers, whales are fantastic to see here. This shows a humpback, although orcas are probably one of the most prominent whales that you'll see in Victoria. Nice sheltered waters around, so you get some really good viewing, great photo opportunities around this area. Victoria, of course, is kind of fairly built up as well, so you've got some beautiful cultural elements that you can see, some gorgeous architecture and a lovely harbour front. The hotel that we've just kind of mentioned here is the Oswego. It's located right in the centre, and again, really nice kind of rooms, so a good place to base yourself when you're here in the city. From here, this is where you will kind of head out into the nature of Vancouver Island, and bears were mentioned earlier, and certainly by Mike. And whilst I don't know the names of these ones, unfortunately, this was taken in Tofino, which is a beautiful beach resort on the kind of southern coast of Vancouver Island. Here you'll find absolutely gorgeous sandy beaches, really beautiful temperate rainforest that kind of covers the whole of the island. And as this kind of photo suggests, the opportunity to see black bears as opposed to grizzly bears. There's Zodiac boats that will kind of take you out to some of the remote islands where you can see them foraging along the coastline. We will kind of centre back into bears in a moment, but I did want to kind of make mention of this particular place, which is located quite close to Fino, that is called Clairquat Resort, and just thought it was worth mentioning for those of you who enjoy a little bit more of a luxury stay when you're away in British Columbia. Clairquat is an absolutely stunning resort, as this kind of photo suggests. It's located deep in the nature of Vancouver Island, with stunning kind of tent, sort of glamping style accommodation, and the opportunity to really do lots of different activities. There is wildlife viewing here, but there's also a whole host of different activities that you can do, and Clairquat will cater to what you want to be doing. So they'll have a chat with you, work out what you want to do, and kind of plan your day so that you can get out and do some wonderful things. Of course, if you fancy relaxing, their spa and hot tubs are also wonderful to check out as well. So good one to see if you are looking for something a bit more luxurious. From here, we'll kind of swing onto Campbell River, and this is on the northern side really of Vancouver Island, and is a well-known sort of little harbour town that you can maybe take to after visiting Tofino. It's well known as a kind of gateway into the wildlife on Vancouver Island. So lots of opportunities to go out and see bears, go and see whales as well. And also you've still got the sort of rainforest surrounding here. So you can kind of relax back at the harbour front, and then be able to take some trips out to some of the beautiful sort of parks and scenery that surrounds this area. In Campbell River, the one place I'd probably suggest staying is the Comfort Inn and Suites. It's a simple hotel, but located right on the harbour front, and a fantastic place to stay. Now, I skipped over a photo, which I'm just going to kind of centre back to here, and that is this glorious place found kind of a little bit further up from Campbell River, and something that a lot of you may have considered visiting if you're thinking about British Columbia is a bear lodge. You may have heard them mentioned quite a lot, and they're certainly something that as a Canada specialist I often get asked about. This particular lodge that you can see here is called Farewell Harbour, and it is one of my favourites in the area, although there is plenty to choose from. Farewell Harbour is, as you can kind of see, almost like a floating lodge. Sort of part of it is moored out in the water, part of it's on land, and here you are in the depths of the Great Bear rainforest, in a gorgeous part, kind of almost off the shore of Vancouver Island. With the bear lodges, what you'll generally do is, in a similar manner to perhaps a safari in Africa, you'll have kind of maybe 3 or 4 days specifically based around bear viewing, whale watching, and really getting out into nature. The thing I love about Farewell Harbour is they particularly centre around kind of getting out and exploring the wilderness. So they'll often do kind of nature walks, boat rides, and just the opportunity to kind of go and see the bears that are local, in a similar manner to what Mike was saying, where they kind of named the bears in the area. The guys at Farewell Harbour know the bears that live in this area really well. They know their habitats. They're really well trained in terms of their habits. So they will be able to find where those bears are going and safely get some fantastic sightings for you. So if you have the opportunity to go, September tends to be the kind of peak time for bear viewing. So whilst you can definitely go at other times of the year, if you're looking for kind of peak times for bears, September is really the best time to go. And then I'll just finish up on a kind of final point, which may be worth consideration if you're looking to visit British Columbia, and that is a company called Maple Leaf Adventures. And as you can see here, they kind of specialize in small boat cruising around Vancouver Island. And they go to lots of different destinations. There's different departures that they do. But they are really based around getting away from perhaps some of the kind of larger cruise ships that you'll also see in this kind of region, and getting to the kind of lesser known parts of British Columbia. The next side and perhaps final one that I will show you here is one of many destinations that they go to, that is called Haiduguai. And it perhaps finishes off quite neatly that Mike was telling us, beautiful history of First Nations culture. And Haiduguai was previously known as the Queen Charlotte Islands. It is really a stunning natural habitat, often known as the Galapagos of Canada, with very unusual flora and fauna in this area. But as these old kind of totem poles show, there is a wealth of First Nations history in this area. And for those of you that really like getting off the beaten track to really remote, different destinations to see something incredible that not a lot of people are going to see when visiting Canada, Maple Leaf Adventures will take you out to places like Haiduguai that are really gems that you can kind of go and see very much away from the crowds. So I hope this gives you a little bit of a food for thought. I don't want to kind of go on too long, but I hope that that will give you some inspiration for your next trip to British Columbia.
Oh, thank you. So many ideas there. I've been jotting down additions to my wish list, like Farewell Harbour. Yeah, definitely that lodge. Like that's brilliant. Haiduguai has been on the list for years. Still haven't made it there, but definitely. So many ideas. Like I say, I've just got a whole list of them. So thank you for that.
No problem.
Which is your favourite lodge or place to stay?
I do think that Farewell Harbour is the one I continuously come back to. They're wonderful people. Mike, you were even saying earlier how much you love the guys over there. And yeah, the experience that they offer is just very intimate, nature-based. It's absolutely stunning. So recommend it to everybody.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to put an even bigger asterisk next to it now.
Big heart.
Exactly. Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, Tim, the owner, works very well with our local First Nations. A very respectful person, and yeah, so we have a great friendship.
Okay, that's really good to know. Really good. Okay, well, because there have been questions coming in, but before we go to them, I realised that we have got another little video that we could play, because Mike, we didn't play. You've got a short video as well,
right?
And
yes.
I think we should play that
Sure.
rather than leave it to the end, just in case anybody has to go before the end. So why don't we all pop off again, and we'll come back for the Q&A straight after this short video.
Be like Kesla. For thousands of years, our people have looked after this land and the surrounding areas. And it was because the land looked after us, and we were a part of everything. We, a part of the Muskamauk Zawadenoch, invite you to join us on a journey into the Great Bear Rainforest. To meet the awe-inspiring animals and incredible humans who come from this beautiful place. Seawolf Adventures is a vehicle that ensures that my team and I are staying connected to our territory while sharing with those who come to visit us. You really do get to know each and every bear and the characteristics that they render and provide. It's like they have their own personalities. The highlight of the tour, of course, is the abundant wildlife that you see when you come to the southern end of the Great Bear Rainforest. Traveling with Seawolf Ventures provides a different perspective, a different depth to the experience. And that is what we are very proud of. We love sharing our own stories and connecting to the landscapes and the animals from our perspective that is older than time itself. Dela Kesla.
Don't you wish you were in that boat? And oh dear. So yeah, oh Mike, yeah, that just got us all excited yet again. Yeah, it's just an evening of highlight after highlight, and I know next time I visit BC, I definitely want to come out with you. I mean, that's tremendous, tremendous. Yeah, just touching back on bears actually, because I know we've had a few questions about bears, and we just saw the bear again in your video. So I was a bit concerned when you said about Emily the bear is the only breeding female in your territory, and is that a problem? You know, is this because of lack of salmon? What is going on?
So the lack of salmon does play a role. Well, I should go back. So Caroline would have been her mother, and we haven't seen her for a couple of years. So I think, you know, the natural, you know, she's probably close to 30 years old now. We haven't seen her come back, but the salmon do play a big role. And for the past few years, the rivers haven't been really, there hasn't been really salmon in the rivers. So they do have to switch. So they leave those areas and they switch to sedge grass, or, you know, going back to turning over rocks. So I believe that that is an impact. But having said that, like me personally, like I was just on the salmon enhancement meeting just before I jumped on this. So we're very, very active in bringing back our wild salmon, and it'll take a couple of years, but it'll pay off.
What sort of measures are taking place? What can you be doing?
So what we're going to do is what they do up in Alaska, but just on a smaller scale, and that's rearing salmon. So it involves hatcheries. And so when you, traditionally they release the salmon fry into the river, but when you do that, there's a lot of predators in the river, right? So up to like 25 to up to 85% could just be eaten up before they actually make it out to the ocean. When you rear salmon, you take the 100% of what you know, and then you put it into pens and you grow them till they're about 5 grams. So we're talking little salmon, but they're just a little bit bigger now, and then you release them. So now you're releasing 100%, right? And now they're faster, they're quicker, their skin's thicker, so the survivability goes way up. So that's the method that we're doing actually in 3 days' time.
Right. Okay. Oh, really good to know. Thank you for that insight. And Roz, going into some practicalities, how easy is it to get to Canada at the moment? I don't know if you know anything about the COVID rules or any of that. What are the practicalities? Are direct flights going again? And is everything open? In fact, is everything booked up? What's the situation?
That's, yes, a very good question, and one that I get often. At the moment, the COVID rules are quite minimal. So the main thing you need to be is fully vaccinated. And there is a form quite similar to the passenger locator form that we had here in the UK that you need to fill out about 72 hours before you go. But other than that, you're all fine to go. Whilst there might be a little bit of mask wearing, there isn't really too many more restrictions in place. So travel is certainly back on the cards for Canada, which is fantastic. Direct flights are running, which is wonderful news. The main thing, as I think, as you say, the availability this year is one that is a little bit more tricky, because we certainly have seen from our perspective, we've had people postponing their trips from 2020, 2021. And of course, just people wanting to get out there this year in general. The availability is very tough. So where I was mentioning about some of those fantastic bear lodges and experiences, chances are you won't be able to get to do those this year. So really suggest, if you're looking to go next year and you want to build a really special trip, plan early. We would say it in any other year, but post-COVID, it's even more important than ever.
And I guess, of course, we are talking about a destination and, you know, wonderful lodges and everything where there isn't a huge capacity. You know, it's
Exactly.
That's what makes it special.
Yes.
Mike,
I just wanted to add to that. Like, I think that's where our day trips, that we kind of pick up the people that can't get into the lodges, right? They could still do the bear day, but stay, you know, in the hotel or, you know, on Vancouver Island. So.
Yeah, sure. Because Mike, how were the last couple of years for you? I mean, were you still able to operate your business? I mean, it must have been very tough for you. And were your community very affected?
Yeah, so we did okay. We had a lot of domestic travelers, which was pretty nice. A lot of people within British Columbia itself came up island, supported, and came out on our tours. And like, people were just exploring their backyards. And there's a lot to explore here. Even on Vancouver Island, I still haven't been to a lot of places. And so I think a lot of that went on. So supporting each other, right? So when I travel, am I going to go far? Or am I going to go somewhere in BC, right? Yeah. And support the local economy. So I think a lot of that went on, especially if, like, for Seawolf, that's what we felt. Our communities were hit hard. Some of the, we lost quite a bit of people to COVID. We turned into a essential service. Kingcom's so remote. So every week we were, the boat was going in, bringing in groceries or bringing, people out to doctor appointments. So we sure adapted and that helped us, but we also helped our community too.
Oh, terrific. Well done. And no, you really obviously had to pull together. And before I go back to Roz, I mean, somebody commented when you were giving your talk, I think it was Edu, that about never lose your language. And, you gave us a taste of your language. And of course, I think we've only just, perhaps becoming aware in the rest of the world that the First Nations have got their own languages. But how commonly used are they? Are the younger generation using them? Will we hear them if we come out?
There's just been this huge push. And, like when everything moved to Zoom, the Zoom community really grew, and language learning happened through Zoom, actually. We were able to access elders, because elders, they don't, they're very fragile and they need to just stay at home. So we were able to utilize them. And yeah, there's a lot of language learning going on right now. And it was sparked like during the 2 years. So.
Well, that was a real positive that came out of it.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Right, Rosalind. So somebody asked about, this is Ali. So traveling in BC, where else further north of Tofino would you recommend traveling to in a car?
Yeah, so there's quite a few different towns and places that you can go to. Going up from Tofino, obviously Campbell River was one of the places that I mentioned, and that's kind of almost on the way up towards the north of the island. From there, you've got places like Telegraph Cove, which is a beautiful little small community, very close to where Mike's kind of tours kind of go from. You've then also got Port Hardy, which is in the very north of the island, and does offer some opportunities to get out to kind of remote beaches and things like that. So those are kind of some of the main places. Also quite close to Campbell River, you've got another little town, other sort of smaller communities like Comox, and there's one particular place called Coombs that is well known for having a kind of food market where there are goats roaming around on the roof of the of the one of the grass covered huts. So if you can go there, that's quite a sight as well.
Oh, that sounds brilliant. And nobody's asked it. I'm a bit surprised yet, but of course there are so many other islands, aren't there, in the region? I mean, even off, there's all those Gulf islands and so on. I mean, how easy is it to get around, island hop, whatever?
Yeah, I'll there are kind of quite regular ferry services that go. Dependent on the island that you're planning to visit, will depend how regularly the ferries go and perhaps how urgently you should book up. Certainly, the ferries going over to Vancouver Island can get very busy, and it's probably worth booking beforehand. The smaller ferries tend to be easier to sort of do at the last, well, not maybe at the last minute, don't do it the hour beforehand, but maybe sort of easier to get onto. So you've definitely got some good networks that can get you around to the various different islands.
Yeah, okay, brilliant. Mike, question from Sally and Tony. They're very interested in the First Nation culture today. Is it possible to visit a potlatch? And I guess really, what can you do to find out more about the First Nations?
I think we don't even know how the potlatches are going to be held, because we haven't been able to gather, right? And so that remains to be seen. It might be hard to visit a potlatch, but the Umista Cultural Center, that will give you all of the information. It's a good overview. There's a lot to look at. There's lots of history in there, and it's more of a setting to visit. It's a museum/cultural center. There's a fee at the door. It gets you access to the main gallery, but there's also other little galleries along the way down the hall. So I would suggest that would be more appropriate.
Okay, no, that sounds good. Thank you for that. And can you give us a bit of an idea of what you'll see when? Because I think, for instance, both of you could chip in on this. Roz, you mentioned September as being particularly good, for instance, seeing bears and wildlife. And generally, but what is it like in different times of the year? If somebody went in the spring next year, should they even travel in the winter? What would it be like in spring? What would you see in the summer? Would somebody like to take that first?
Go ahead.
I'll give kind of a rundown, although I'm sure Mike will be far more versed than me to say which wildlife's at different times. But the winter is trickier for wildlife, I'd say. So probably you're better off sticking in the kind of May to October times when you'll get the best kind of wildlife viewing. You do still have a chance of seeing bears and wildlife during outside of September. What we tend to always say is the bears get a little bit lazier in July and August. They're not kind of trying to stock up on food as often. So they tend to be, maybe less prominent than in September when they're really stocking up on food and getting into the salmon, and equally in sort of June time when they're coming out of hibernation, and they're often kind of bringing their cubs with them. In terms of the whales in Vancouver Island, you have opportunities to see them almost kind of year through at different parts of the island, but certainly I think September in the northern reaches has always been known to be a better kind of time to see them, and as Mike was saying earlier, October as well. But realistically, if you went in June, July, August, you'd still have fantastic opportunities to see whales then as well. It would just be the case of maybe working out which point of the island that you're going to, so you don't end up missing out because you're trying to see whales at the wrong side, you know.
Yeah, sure. Okay, Mike, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think we go to a place for bears, and it's usually it's good in June because they're out right now. You know, the ones that are foraging, you know, along the shorelines. So there are a few bears that we work with right from June, like you say, getting into September, they're hoping for the salmon. The orcas, they don't come until maybe the first week of July in the area. I'm talking about the northern residents, but the transients or the bigs, we're blessed with them at any time. Yeah, I think that's all I had to. I think you did a great job.
Okay, brilliant. Mike, question from James, who missed the beginning of the webinar. Are there any First Nations run museums that can be visited around Vancouver area or BC?
So there's the one on Quadra Island called Nuyumbalis, but the spectacular one is the one I'm talking about, the Umista Cultural Center, and that's in Alert Bay. There's lots to see in Alert Bay, lots of culture. There's the big house that I talked about, like the enormous big house. There's the tallest totem pole. There's actually culturally modified trees where you could actually see where they've planked cedar trees and pulled the planks off, and, you know, without killing the tree, and the tree's healing up. So there's lots of cool things to see. There's the cemetery, which has all of the old monuments, the totem poles along the front street.
Oh, terrific. No, brilliant. Well, when we do the follow-up email, we'll make sure we mention it, because that sounds really good. And sorry, another question for Mike just come in. You mentioned the sea otters in the north of Vancouver Island, but where exactly are they? Is it Port Alice?
So Port Alice is on the other side, and we depart from Port Hardy. So then you go sort of west and around Hope Island. So we're not around the tip of the Vancouver Island. We're sort of just on the northern section. And they're actually moving down. So sometimes we'll see a raft just out here in the bay. So.
Oh, wow. Well, that'd be amazing. Yeah, we all go a bit gooey. I'm sure you do over there as well. We all go a bit gooey about sea otters.
Oh yeah, especially the pups. You know, they look like big babies. They're like literally like maybe 3/4 of the size of the mom, but they're still need to be pampered, right?
Exactly. It's like, oh gosh. Okay, well, I think we are running out of the time. I'm just seeing if we've missed any questions. I know Audley have been very good, for instance, at answering them, and of course we will put some of them in the follow-up email. Lots of people as well sort of chipping in and also saying how interesting it was. So thank you so much. So before we finish, sorry to put you guys on the spot, but I'd love you to recommend, if you know, for the sort of typical person watching this tonight, if you're going to recommend one experience, and obviously, Mike, in your case, it can absolutely be one that they can do with Sea Wolf Adventures. But if you said to somebody, you've got to do this one fantastic experience when you come to BC, I want to know what it's going to be. So I'm going to go to Rosalind first. So what would yours be, Ros?
I certainly don't want to sound like a broken record and just say bears again, but I think if you can get out to see bears, whether that is on a day tour like Mike's, whether it is at a bear lodge, whichever kind of capacity that you can kind of come to see the wildlife, it's incredible and so different, I think, to anything that you've seen before. Don't just kind of come to British Columbia and, you know, avoid the nature. I think it's so beautiful that if you can come out to see it, it's really worth your time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay then, Mike, sorry to put you on the spot, but just one thing that our viewers or readers need to do when they come out to British Columbia, what's it going to be?
Well, of course, come to see sea wolf and coastal rainforest safaris.
Of course.
If I was to
And
recommend
which the details of and link to will be in the follow-up email.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I like what Farewell Harbour has to offer. I like their lodge, and it's about people, and we really get along with them. So I would recommend them. Nemo Bay is a magical place too. And then probably our new establishment in Echo Bay, where you saw the floating cabins. That's going to be up and running. So yeah, sorry, not one, but there's a few.
Okay, that's fair enough. We'll let you off. Okay, well, thank you so much to you both. That was terrific. Thank you to everybody who joined us tonight. And I can see we're getting a lot of love in the chat box. So I know you found it all as fascinating as I did. So huge thank you again to Rosalind from Audley and to Mike from Seawolf Adventures for giving us that fantastic insight into British Columbia. Thank you, guys, and good night.
All right.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.